Welcome in everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Got a lot to run through tonight. The developments today, but I just got breaking news. That's why I'm 5 minutes late. I've got an update for you. This is great intel. I'm the first to report it that I've seen it on Twitter. This did come from reporting from David Sisk, who covers Kentucky men's basketball. But the Arkansas Razorbacks are among four finalists for Jaron Pierre Jr. Now, I was the one that broke the news a few days ago that Arkansas had been in contact with the Conference USA Player of the Year's agent, that Arkansas had reached out, and that he had not yet spoken with that agent. But he had, or excuse me, had not, that the player had not yet spoken directly with Arkansas. The agent had, but the player had talked to a couple of SEC teams, Kentucky and Ole Miss. Well, the news that I have now, and this is coming from a source that got it from Sisk, is that Arkansas, SMU, Ole Miss, and Auburn. You see that Auburn name a lot. We're going to talk about Auburn a lot tonight, explain some of that on some of these players that Arkansas is after, including Malik Ewin. But Pierre, we talked a lot about him. Same, such a similar situation other than not being an in-state kid. He's from New Orleans, to Lamar Wilkerson. And Jerome Pierre Jr., 6'5", can play the one or two. He can be a combo, but statistically very similar. Both of them were first team all conference USA. Pierre at Jacksonville State, but 21.5 points per game, over 5 rebounds per game. Several assists. I think it was over 3 assists per game. I didn't have time to go back and look at his exact stats, but the stats I do remember are the fact that he shot nearly the same volume from three. I think 7.6 attempts from three, whereas Wilkerson was 7.7, and 38% from three on that volume. So that's really good percentage based on that volume, and it's proven at the college level. And here's a guy that's a veteran guard, that's got good size, a knockdown shooter, a really good shooter, not elite in terms of 40% or better, but a really high percentage on high volume. Now, he's also in the NBA draft pool. This is very interesting. He is supposedly going to make a decision announcement come Monday. So what's interesting to me here, we've talked about players, sneaking onto campus for visits before the dead period. Could this be a guy that did that with Arkansas, even though he told me when I got him on the phone that he hadn't spoken with anybody with Arkansas yet, just that his agent did. So taking that as word, that probably didn't happen. The dead period ends today. The on-campus, off-campus visit stuff ends today. So tomorrow, assuming he's going to take visits, but where has he been and where might he visit? Because he's got 4 schools that I just mentioned. He's going to make a decision by Monday. So I don't know where this goes in terms of Arkansas. It's because this is just breaking right now. I need to do some more digging. I was 5 minutes late on here. So the other interesting thing is he's in the NBA draft, declared for that, and he has a workout. I put this in my tweet. He has a workout with the Washington Wizards upcoming. So all of this becomes more and more interesting as it moves along with players in the portal, some of them in the NBA draft selection, draft process, testing the waters. Could Arkansas be in play here? This would be the kind of guy in the backcourt that you're probably only adding if somebody's leaving, that you think that among the 4 that you might be looking at retaining. DJ Wagner's the one that we've said over and over is probably on the fence about staying. It seems like other players are more likely to stay, which I gave percentages on that. Trevor Brazile, Carter Knox, Billy Richmond III. So the natural thought process is, well, here's a guard that's a combo that would come in and play, would fill in if DJ left, who's a combo. So I don't know exactly what this means, because we know Arkansas's identified 2 big men who have, by the way, both, since we were on last night, and I reported that Nick Pringle's paperwork was formally completed through the U of A as part of its process, and this was all part of the same procedural stuff that led to visits and eventual public commitments. Well, after I was finished last night, we came on kind of late. I learned that Ewin's paperwork went through, and I reported. I didn't come back on and do one of these because it was too late. I'd already done about an hour, but I did tweet that and put it over on hogville.net. So Malik Ewin's paperwork through the U of A is also completed as part of his process. Now it's just about when are guys going to visit. And so we got more news to talk about with you. And that was what I was going to lead with. That's the photo that I have on the thumbnail because I didn't have time. Deep respect for your work, media resources, and research. Well, I have a lot of media sources. You're talking about me being in the media and my sources, other sources in the media. I have that, but I also talk to agents. I talk to players. I talk to people connected with the NBA who are connected to the college game. I talk to a lot of Division I coaches, mostly assistant coaches. It's a plethora. It's not just, I don't just go jump on some forum where there's other media people and they're sharing the same information. Sometimes that gets recycled. I respect that as part of the process. I mentioned this last night, but I expand my field of knowledge to a bunch of different folks that can help me connect the dots. I don't speak about what others do. I just speak about how I do mine. So anyway, I appreciate you bringing that up. I'm not trying to sound defensive, but I know how this works, and many of you probably don't. And so for me to help you connect the dots, that's why I constantly say this source said this. This source said this. I can't name this source. This source is connected with the pro part of it. So because I'm trying to give as much clarity as the perspective. Where are these source perspectives coming from? So I maybe give you more information than some like, and maybe others eat that stuff up. I'm a junkie, and I'm talking to the junkies, and the ones that are less junky can still get stuff out of it. And if it goes an hour, so be it. I'm not going to apologize for. I do sometimes apologize for it. Some of that's on me. I am repetitive sometimes when I want the point to sink in. It's why last night I went through all of the disclaimers about when you see the paperwork being done on players and you're hearing about these back silent commits, things can change. And until they go public, and Calipari's not even going to let it go public until he's had them on campus. He wants the whole thing sewn up before he lets something like that get out. So we're going to talk about Malik Ewin and the timing of things based on the fact that his paperwork to come to Arkansas through the admissions office is completed now. And you're thinking, well, that's the done deal. Well, last night I explained not only did those things happen with two players in Calipari's first recruiting cycle, Jordan Burks and Brandon Garrison, not only had the paperwork been done, but both of those players had been on campus. And those didn't work out because one was catch and release. The other one was effectively the same thing when Arkansas wouldn't raise the NIL for Garrison. And so he jumped to the place that out of the blue said, we'll do it. You're not even haven't been on our campus yet, but you're visiting with Calipari. He just left us. We need to make a splash. So things like that are going to happen. But they had actually had paperwork done and had been on campus. We don't even know if either Ewin or Pringle have been on campus yet. Maybe not with one or either. So you can't count these chickens because they really haven't hatched formally yet. We're just explaining process as we go. Without knowing the paperwork has been done, you're more in the dark about where things might really stand with them. So it's good information to have. There'll be some people that'll come in after the fact and complain, well, don't show me the baby. Don't show me the 9 months to get there or whatever. Show me the finished product. No, people are fascinated by this stuff and they want to know what's going on with their program. And you're not going to get a lot of information directly from the program. They can't comment on recruits. Arkansas staff doesn't even like for visits to leak out when it comes to portal players. You know that. Nelly was here and we didn't know it. So we're doing everything we can to construct this for you. And then don't blame the messenger if the player doesn't actually end up at Arkansas. That's the difference between process and results. All right. So we're going to keep going on this. What's Brian asking? Good question, Brian, but I didn't see Brian's question. These things roll off and I miss them. You know how I am. All right, so I think it's good news. We broke the Arkansas contact with Jaron Pierre Jr. a few days ago. My spidey senses always kind of point me in directions that things may be going with Arkansas. And then we'll see if this ends up having any traction. We'll see if this really means is DJ Wagner maybe, are they just covering bases right now? Has this thing got a real chance to land him? Because it's hard for me to believe, even if you keep the two big men in Ewin and Pringle as we think it's heading toward, or if it's one of those two and another big man, you got to have two big men. We know you've got four signed. Let's do the numbers real quick. Darius Acup Jr., Malik Thomas, Isaiah Seeley, and Kareem Rattal. That's four. All right. Assuming you've got DJ for now, nothing's been announced. And Trevor Brazile, Carter Knox, Billy Richmond third. That's four more. That's eight. And then the two big men, whether it's these two, a combination of one of these two and someone else, or two other players altogether, we'll see what happens. Remember, don't count those chickens yet. They haven't fully hatched. That gets you to 10. You're going to expand from 9 to 11. That leaves the room for one more. Does anyone really think that Arkansas is just going to go get another guard if DJ stays and not add at least one more piece since Adu Thero's gone to that either a 3-4 combo or another 4 to back up Brazil? I don't believe that. And I believe the backcourt numbers, because we went through it a couple of episodes ago where I was trying to explain if DJ comes back and you're getting Acuff and Malik Thomas and you got Carter Knox and Billy Richmond, you got 5 players right there in your 1 through 3, and you add another guy to the guard part, and now the minutes don't really work out there because your 2-3s aren't really versatile enough, in my opinion, to do what you need to do to play them extended minutes as a 3-4 somewhere. Maybe you try to get by at times with that. We saw it last year because of attrition, but you're trying to expand the roster and get past attrition where you're not in those situations. So to me, if Arkansas is going deep here, and it sounds like they are if they're in the Final Four, Calipari does not want his name on Arkansas or his name on a list that's not sincere. The previous coaching staff didn't care about that. They loved the marketing. They wanted that. That's not how Calipari rides. That means Arkansas, and it helps maybe explain why Wilkerson, what we were talking about him last night, maybe the possibilities that he wasn't locked in with Indiana or Kentucky, that I was hearing smoke for both. Well, his Final Four list came out while we were on through Joe Tipton, basically what should be his Final Four visits and then a decision. It was Indiana, Kentucky, Ole Miss, and here comes Auburn. There's Auburn again. And so that looks like what it is. I told you guys what his agent was telling me yesterday, and that I was supposed to follow up with him today. Well, I see that list come out. I sent him a text last night. Hey, what is this? Is this it then? Is this reporting fully the full picture? Kind of give me a hint, some clue here. Is this completely eliminate Arkansas? Because that way I look at this, it does. Well, I can't say anything on the record about whether or not he replied, but someone in the know with his situation sent me a text this morning saying, "Good morning." I'm going to read it to you. I don't want this attributed to me, but it's unlikely he attends Arkansas. So you can connect dots, try to figure out who it was that sent that to me. I can't tell you who it was, but you may be able to easily connect that dot, based on everything we've talked about the last 2 days on this. But if Arkansas is really pushing hard on Pierre, that tells me that either they feel more comfortable with what he brings in some sense as a player, even though they're very similar in terms of fit, or maybe there's a connection there and a relationship there. Yes, Wilkerson's from Arkansas. Arkansas fans would, all things being equal, would want the Arkansas kid. I get that, but we don't know everything behind the scenes, and we don't know if Arkansas even ends up with Pierre. And if it looks like they are, it probably means DJ Wagner's out. That's what I think right now. I'm not going to budge off the 50-50 thing that I backed down to last night after being 51-49. I know that gets a little comical. I'm just going to leave it at 50-50 until I hear something more definitive, because it's been back and forth. But this is the kind of thing that telegraphs maybe. It could also be that Arkansas got to a point where DJ's staying. Let's look at another aspect of this. Arkansas got to a point where they figured out that DJ Wagner's staying, and they had been pursuing Pierre, and they've just left him on the Arkansas on the list. And Arkansas is not going to be in it. I mean, again, I don't know if he had time to visit before the dead period, if he's making a decision Monday. And he'd been talking to Ole Miss for a while. And some of this stuff, I'm going to get to Ewin and why the top 5 was announced today, if his paperwork was already submitted. I've already kind of explained that. Again, we talked about it yesterday. I went through it again, but I'll do it again since you're asking right now. I don't mind doing it. Some of this stuff could be timing, right? His list. There are players putting lists out and then making their commitment announcement. Some of that happens on the same day. So some of that's about attention, and they were always going to put a list out, but, there's that part of it. The other part of it is things can change. I went through the 2 players who did their paperwork last year. We went through all of it last year. I repeated it again. That did not end up at Arkansas. Most of the ones who went through the process did. Those are outliers relative to the success stories. But there are all things that are moving and shaking. With Jordan Burks, the idea, he was one of the first two to be on campus. He and Big Z. Big Z came off the board. Burks was committed privately, and they got his paperwork done. But then Adu Thero came in the picture for Arkansas, and Arkansas moved toward him. Burks was not going to figure into a top non-rotation. That was part of why he was coming, that maybe he would be in the rotation. So once that happened, it was catch and release. There are other reasons why things happen. Garrison Brooks. No, not Garrison Brooks. I've gone blank. Garrison Brooks is somebody else. But the big man that left Oklahoma State, visited the day after Jonas Adu, and ended up at Kentucky. So again, just because the process is going on, I give the caveats, I give the disclaimers so that you understand that process is probably leading in 90% of the time to the result that you want, that you think's happening. Sometimes the process doesn't. What is the portal? It's the wild, wild west. NIL money is going up and getting crazy. Why is Auburn on Ewin's list? We talked about this as a possibility the other day when I said Ewin, it's a lot of smoke for Arkansas, but who are the same teams going after big men? Frontline guys, teams that are losing a lot. Auburn, Michigan, and Kansas. And then when Floyd Bedinga came back out of the portal, I told you the story why he went in to begin with. They lowballed his retention offer. Then he got out of the portal because they fixed that, and he went back to Kansas. Maybe Kansas leaves Ewin alone now. What about Auburn? They didn't get Lindeborg. They weren't okay with hanging around for his draft process. Bedinga was another guy they ran on. Well, he went back to Kansas. I said, just keep an eye on things. It looks good for Arkansas, but things can change. What was Auburn doing at the time that the smoke was picking up for Arkansas? They were playing in a Final Four. Okay. You say, well, what does that matter? They can't recruit and be in the Final Four at the same time. They got Keyshawn Hall the week of their lead up to the Final Four. But Keyshawn Hall had been in the portal since day one. In fact, I was talking about Keyshawn Hall portal before the portal even opened, being connected to Arkansas. Ewin went in a little bit later. Auburn may not have had time to get on him and throw an offer at him. So maybe Arkansas's in the lead. He's privately committed. They've done the paperwork. That doesn't mean another team can't jump in there and make some other offer or promise. Auburn's been to 2 Final Fours in the last 5 years. They got a lot to sell. Process and results. I don't want to sound arrogant about it or condescending, but it's not. I know I'm looking at this stuff and dealing with it all day long, and y'all just want end answers. A lot of you just want the end result answers. I get that. So we can either not say anything and not talk basketball or anything and just come on when someone's publicly committed, or I can walk you through the fascinating parts of this stuff on the back end. I don't come out here and talk about rumors. I don't. I vet just everything I can. It doesn't mean that everything's going to work out exactly like it looks like for a while that it might. Now I feel like this has turned into a lecture section. I dropped my cheap reading glasses in the process. All right. So I think it's fascinating. Let's get back to some other stuff here. Brandon Garrison. I was thinking, I said Garrison Brooks. That was another player. And someone just put Garrison, then I remembered Brandon Garrison. Yeah, Brandon Garrison. Remember that we were saying the whole time that Calipari had a plan to get both Jonas Adu and Brandon Garrison. And the plan, the other part of that was I kept saying, I'm not sure that they'll get both. But there was a plan for that. Well, then I find out where they're both, the stuff's already lined up for both of them. And they're not going to do the paperwork stuff unless they told them I'm coming. Not just to visit, I'm basically committing. And it's not public yet, and they got to get them on campus first before it can go public. But I think Garrison's camp always thought that they were going to be able to climb the NIL a little bit more. And if not, Arkansas would be the choice over other teams that were in the same valuation range. Once Kentucky jumped out there, and I've explained why that was, to beat Cal, and basically doubled whatever everyone else was offering, it changed the dynamic. Arkansas had Big Z in the fold. Remember, Calipari said because of injuries, Big Z was going to have a bigger role than he thought. But the role he envisioned for him, Brandon Garrison could have been a backup to Jonas Adu. And the reason why you can believe that is because what was he at Kentucky? He was a backup to Amari Williams. It was never that he had to be the guy. It was about the NIL price tag. All right, so I've gone more into that to explain again. Process, things look like they're moving along with certain guys. You're about to get them. But what something else that's timed up with this Malik Ewin thing, he released a 5 schools that he's focused on. That came out today. Arkansas, Kansas, there's Auburn again, Mississippi State. What did Mississippi State just happened? They lost a coach. 2 frontline guys jumped in the portal immediately and followed him. A 3rd frontline guy jumped in the portal, Keyshawn Murphy, yesterday, and their new coach just got hired a few days ago. Oh, lo and behold, they're after Ewin. They're talking. Things have changed. Things have changed since Ewin committed privately to Arkansas, whatever's going on there to move the paperwork along and make that happen. Or he's just put his list out of schools that are showing interest, and the situation with Arkansas is moving along fine, and he wants a list out. Maybe Nick Pringle puts a list out. He hasn't done that, so maybe he doesn't use that. There's more than one way that this could be playing. There's more than one way. So this commitment could be solid, and his list just came out. We're about to hear, he comes on his visit to Arkansas, and it's over. He had an impressive list out. I don't know the answer to that. It seems odd to me, the timing a little bit. But let's go back. Let's go back to when Ewin and the word started to come around that he was that Arkansas was going to get him, likely to land him. That was on Friday, April 4th. On Saturday, April 5th, Eddie Lampkin Jr., who's been in the college game forever at Syracuse, before that, Colorado, before that, TCU for 3 years. He's got a medical hardship from year 1, but he goes in the portal on Saturday. Well, on Sunday, we hear the Nick Pringle stuff picking up that Arkansas is likely to get him. But Pringle had been in the portal before Ewin. So sometimes you're hearing about the interest or where things may be moving opposite of what the timing of contacts were, and maybe some things that could have happened like visits. So you're always trying to unfold that and make it line up. And it's not always clean how it lines up. Just because we heard about Pringle coming to Arkansas 2 days after Ewin doesn't mean that that's how the timing was when they went in the portal, which it isn't. And maybe one of them could have visited, or maybe the other one didn't have time yet to do it. We've talked about all that. So you're trying to unfold all of this. But Lampkin's been in the portal since Saturday, but earlier today, the list of schools that have contacted Lampkin came out, and Arkansas is on that list. So that combined with Ewin's list will make you think, Arkansas is contacting Lampkin. We just found that out this morning, but also Ewin's got a top 5. Maybe things aren't all that great with Ewin as we thought. Maybe. That could absolutely be true. Could also be true that the timing's odd. We don't know, since that list came out for Lampkin today, when all these schools contacted him. It could have been Arkansas reached out on Saturday in between firming up Pringle and Ewin, and just made a contact, because they've got to have 2 big men. They've got to cover all bases. They might have contacted him later this week or this morning before the list came out, because Ewin's going to put out a top 5. And even though they've gone far enough to get his paperwork done, other schools are trying to get him. I'll go back to the story of Isaiah Moss at Iowa when he went in the portal, and Eric Patrick Musselman went out and got his commitment. And it wasn't only a private commitment, it went public. It got out there. And what did Kansas do? Kansas swept in and got him. Sometimes it happens even when the commitment's announced publicly. There's no guarantees. And over time, it's been easier and easier to get out of signed paperwork or to be released, So no one should be surprised that things can change. And who's on the list for Ewin of the 5? Kansas. I just mentioned Kansas taking a committed Arkansas player. You think a private commitment's going to keep Kansas from trying to get him? Auburn needs a big man. We've talked about that with Ewin when we first found out. I'm repeating that, but it's no surprise they're on the list. It's no surprise that Auburn's also on the list for Eddie Lampkin in terms of contacts, or Mississippi State. You're going to see some of the same schools that have the same needs Arkansas does. So until you get over the finish, you've got competition for it, and you also have the possibility that Arkansas sees someone now coming in the portal that maybe they can upgrade. That's what happened with Thero versus Jordan Burks. It can cut so many different ways. NIL, a player that you have committed could have another school saying, we'll offer you this, and then they welsh on the agreement with Arkansas, maybe thinking, okay, I want to go to Arkansas. I want to stick with this plan. but now I can get it more NIL money from this place. Maybe I try to leverage that, and maybe Arkansas says no thank. I mean, there's so many ways that this could be cutting. And so again, I sound a little dramatic on a soapbox because the information is only as good in real time. Again, and as things develop, it could be completely different tomorrow. The Wilkerson information, I mean, it's changed so many times. Nothing would surprise me at this point. I can't even 100% rule out Arkansas, even though all the signs seem to say that, because this stuff is so crazy. He is an Arkansas kid, and who knows what dynamic could turn that around. I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying, let's not, assume anything right now. I think the thing on Pringle, it has been quiet with him. It's been quiet in terms of other schools and whether he's going to visit or not anywhere. I mean, none of that's out there. And so it very well may be that Arkansas has fully sewn that up, even though we can't count that chicken yet. They got the visit, whether it's happened or not, at some point he's going to have to make a public commitment. And even then, at the end of the day, and I put this on HogvilleNET, the message board earlier today, until they're on campus, when they're enrolled for summer session 1, and they take that physical, and then they start the early first week of June and July, limited practice stuff, now they're yours. That's when and then you'll have some guys that don't even get there that soon. They've got other, whether they're playing for Team USA or some other obligation that the staff's okay with. You may have some players that come a little later, and you're waiting around on that. It doesn't mean that they're not coming, but until they're really there, all kinds of stuff can happen to undo it. So don't shoot the messenger. The information is really good. The paperwork is done on both Nick Pringle and Malik Ewin to be Razorbacks next year. Paperwork's done. Doesn't mean it. We'll see what happens. Maybe both are solid, maybe only one, maybe none. Topping 4 million, maybe. That kind of stuff. I mean, the whole Nate Mint thing's been about driving that NIL up, seeing what other portal players are getting. We went through all that last night. Nothing new there. We'll see if he makes a quick commitment announcement. We'll see if it's really Duke. Arkansas, I've said it a million times, NIL offers great. There's wiggle room to move up on that. I'm not convinced that Arkansas is not going to get him. I'm not convinced that Tennessee won't get him. I'm not convinced Louisville won't. The Kentucky people are convinced they're not getting him. But, I mean, they throw money around. They've gone after a lot of players. They'll throw money around. If they change their mind on that, they can go. They'll get the resources, and maybe they're not. I mean, who knows? Maybe the decision's already made, and he's going to announce tomorrow, like some people think. I don't know. All of this stuff is so fluid. And you get sick of hearing that. You're like, well, what can we really count on? I mentioned it when they show up. Usually when it goes public, you're not going to lose a guy. I gave you an example to scare you, but it happens. So, so if you're doing the numbers game, 4 sign, 3 or 4 retain, 2 big men, that leaves you really, if you're going to 11, only 1 or 2 more guys to add. Jerron Pierre Jr., who we just talked about, Arkansas is now in his Final Four. Decision expected Monday. Craziness. Don't know till you know. What we know, but what we talk about that's happened, we know that's happened, and it looks good. But looking good and feeling good, Lewis, aren't always the same thing. Something interesting. I'm going to go through players now. Here in a second, I'm going to go through some players and a high school player that's not named Nate Mint. So I'm going to go through some of that. And I'll jump back in and talk a little bit more about Eddie Lampkin, who the big man at Arkansas was on the list today, that came out today, that's contacted him. And 2 previous Arkansas staffs, by the way, recruited him. But before I do that, I want to talk about Calipari. While we were on last night, we'd been on a few minutes maybe, and he tweeted out a video, about 2 minutes, maybe a little less, thanking the fans, talking about, we started on 5, you hung in there with us, the the crowds, he was complimentary of everything. And then he started talking about, we're going to have retention. We're going to retain players. I'm still going to recruit high school players. I'm not changing who I am. And then he, obviously portal, and he made the statement where guys we bring in out of the portal are going to have to be, program kind of guys. They're going to have to, the message was it's beyond just what they bring to the table statistically or production wise. It's being the right kind of fit and being right for the program. All that sounds great. Nothing specific about, they can't talk about players in specifics that they're recruiting until they're signed. And that's official and approved of the NCAA clearinghouse. What he could have done in theory was mention maybe some names of guys that are coming back for sure. He didn't go that far. Maybe they just wanted to come out in a certain time frame with public announcements. I don't know if they'll do public announcements. We don't know that. But I found a few things interesting when he talked about the freshmen, and he's going to continue to be who he's always been and go after high-level freshmen. He said now they're going to have to come in and beat out older guys or compete with older guys or whatever. Well, that's true. And you start thinking, well, how does that apply to this team and who they are after? Well, Darius Acuff Jr., if DJ Wagner stays, in theory, one of those guys will get the bulk of the minutes at the one. Acuff's coming in for a major role. Is he talking about there's a possibility that could be diminished by, say, a DJ Wagner? Malik Thomas. If you're going to go get one of these guys like Jerron Pierre Jr., that can impact him and his minutes. Let's say if DJ Wagner moved on, you're going to have you're going to be competing with older guys. If you go and get a guy like Jir Watkins, who we're going to talk about more a little bit, that's another, a 3-4 kind of, you could play him the small ball 4, also play him at the wing. Could he be someone that impacts minutes for guys like, or opportunities even for some second year guys like Carter Knox, who are a little younger, and Billy Richmond. So I think there's always going to be competition in what works and what doesn't. But when you keep your true playing rotations down to 8 or 9, everybody's going to get opportunities and have a role game to game. And now you've just got to go out and compete for some of that stuff. There are promises that Calipari makes. Some of that's clear. And so you just have to see how that works out in the wash. But I think it's interesting that he said all that. Now, if you're looking for any other clues, so I watched it, went back and watched it a second time. You're always looking at background stuff. And I noticed the desk he was at had a bunch of pictures on it. And so I decided to count the pictures. And there were 15 pictures. There were 14 on the desk, and there was a single picture on his wall. So 15. But he also had a stack of books. And I couldn't count all the books. I couldn't tell where one book started or one book ended. I was trying, is that 5 books stacked up, 6? So instead of worrying about all that, I just used another formula. I just said that's one stack of books. So 1 plus 15 is 16. Arkansas made the Sweet 16. If you take the 4 signed players, right, and you take the 4 potential retained players, that's 8. 8 times 2 big men, is 16, right? So I'm doing all this math, but the single stack of books, one may be that if you retain everybody and you get the 2 big men, you're only going to maybe add one more to get to 11. Maybe that's what that signified. So, if you're always trying to have a conspiracy theory and look at things in the background, that's probably an awkward, attempt at humor there. You can't read, the point is that you really can't read too much in what he said, other than maybe a little bit of it's interesting. The competition part, the culture fit that he was kind of leaning towards when he was talking about bringing in portal guys, you pay attention to that. And this is not in a vacuum. When he was hired, he was talking about he's going to have to drill down on the roster. He was going to have to take less freshmen and really focus on retention. That was going to be a big part of it. And obviously, portal, he needed older guys. And the way you get an older roster and not have half of it be freshmen is retention and out of the portal. So he's really kind of bookending what he said this time last year to begin that recruiting cycle, which is effectively him bringing half of Kentucky's either roster / signed class. That was half of 2/3 of Arkansas's roster, by the way. And you only truly got 2 portal guys because you kept Trevor Brazile. At the end of the day, you may end up with only 3 portal guys, 2 big men and someone to fit on that 3-4 or true 4 behind Trevor Brazile. Or if DJ leaves, 2 more players, and that would be another backcourt like a Jerron Pierre Jr. This is not that complicated when you really start adding the math. It's not that crazy. Florida was deep as hell. I mean, so we're 35 minutes in. We broke the news tonight about Jerron Pierre Jr. having Arkansas in his Final Four. Going to make a decision Monday. I don't know what he's done in terms of visits, if Arkansas could have snuck him in before the dead period, or if he's going to maybe come this weekend. Remember, I told you Arkansas is going to have as many as 4 visitors over the next 3 weeks. I was not given a name. Maybe he's one of them. We were thinking maybe Wilkerson, maybe it's him, maybe it's not him. Maybe Arkansas is just on the list because they pursued him for a while and stopped, but he kept them on the list because it looks good. Now, Calipari doesn't want to be on any list to look good for him like that. But the player, once you're in touch with them and you've made any moves at all, they can put you on their list. And who's going to debate, without real source information coming out, that Arkansas wasn't truly after him. This has happened so fast, and not knowing, maybe we learn he's going to visit Arkansas coming up. The fact that he's been talking to Ole Miss for a while, and Ole Miss is on that Final Four list, makes me wonder. SMU, Auburn. It wouldn't take much for Bruce Pearl to convince him, hey, look what we did in the backcourt this year around. Everyone talks Janai Broome, but we have a lot of backcourt pieces that make this thing work, and we're having to reload. All 4 of those teams are serious. SMU now in the ACC, it's no longer a mid-major, and they've made some moves, some good recruiting moves at times. So they've got a high-level freshman coming in Jaden Toombs, big-time player on the high school ranks coming in. So, you've got a lot going on here for Arkansas, it seems like, but really at the end of the day, you may only get, 3 guys, maybe 4. 4 would seem like a lot for Calipari, right? But that likely means DJ left or someone else you're trying to retain, but he seems the most likely candidate. I said last night when we did this segment, someone's talking about Brandon Garrison leaving Kentucky. I mentioned last night, went through their frontline recruiting, and that Brandon Garrison was kind of in that 4 rotation, except I was hearing that he's maybe going to go in the portal, which would open up recruiting again for staying on a guy like Alvaro Folgeras out of Robert Morris, who's back in Spain right now physically, but Kentucky's been on him, and that maybe Garrison goes portal. So we did talk about that last night. Someone brought it up here, so we'll go there again with it. This is all fascinating to me. So for Malik Ewin, for those freaking out about the Final 5, I would say don't. Either he's going to stay the course and it ends up being Arkansas, but if he doesn't, it means that because other really good players are going to the portal. I mentioned Eddie Lampkin that Arkansas has already reached. We talked about Keyshawn Murphy yesterday. I would say Lampkin, I wouldn't, just looking at Lampkin, that's not a drop off from you. And you could even argue it would be a step up potentially. And I'm not just saying that. But look at his list of teams that are contacted. I mentioned Auburn, Mississippi State, the same ones that are on Ewan's list. Virginia is another team that's on both lists. Virginia just hired a coach. They need a big man. They're on the final that's 5 list for Ewan, and they're also among the teams that reached out to Lampkin once when that list came out earlier today, and he went in the portal on Saturday. So he hadn't been in there all that long, not as long as others. But 6'11", 265, 11.5 points, 9.6 rebounds, 2.1 assists. He's got some for a guy his size. It's not that he moves all that great up and down the court like that, but he's agile enough where he turns well enough and has a little finesse nuance in some of the things he does, and he's a good passer. 59.6% field goal shooter, 64.1% from the free throw line, just about 30 minutes per game. 3 years at TCU. Year 1, he only played 10 games, and so he was injured. That's probably his hardship because he's already used his COVID year. But he was, Arkansas. I covered him on the Nike circuit, grassroots circuit. You hear me say this all the time. Well, I've been doing it for years, and I interview all these players because Mike Anderson recruited him. Eric Patrick Musselman also recruited him. So I've interviewed him multiple times. I put a bunch of tweets out with some of his highlights that I took video of. Maybe put out a video interview. I don't remember now, but I have interviewed him. But he's a guy that's had Arkansas in his wheelhouse more than once, and apparently Arkansas has reached out again. So I wouldn't worry. It seems like there's less buzz about Nick Pringle doing anything else, but you don't know if that could change. But again, when when I look at a Keyshawn Murphy out of Mississippi State, I don't know what his plans are, but he's another guy because he's a rim protector that would complement either Ewin or Pringle in some regard. And so I don't think some of the names that are out here, another one I mentioned yesterday, Mustafa Tiam, a 7'2", 7'1", 7'2", maybe going into the portal out of Central Florida. So there's going to be good players that Arkansas gets for those two frontline pieces. It's likely still Pringle and Ewin. It could be one or the other, or it could be neither. But again, there's going to be more players coming in the portal. There's quality coming in. I mean, Jir Watkins, for folks that said, man, if you don't get Nate Ament, you miss Keyshawn Hall. Well, Jir Watkins is a guy that fits the bill. We talked about him a lot more last night than other players. But 18.4 points to lead Florida State this year, over 5.5 rebounds. His shooting percentages, I talked about this last night, not great. 43% overall from the field, 32 point something percent from three. Shoots in the low mid 70s from the free throw line, low to mid 70s. But he's a guy that's very productive and would fit. He could slide right in. He's not a Thero. There aren't many players you're going to find in the portal that are. Maybe that have the same height and weight or similar, but man, he was like jam-packed with just muscle and like cut out of a mountain and explosive. I mean, he's got a combination of stuff that most guys you're going to be looking at aren't going to bring that. It's why, because he's not a skill guy at all, that he's even being talked about late first round, mid, early second round, or even being drafted at all because of that athletic, that body and athletic package. So some of these other guys that are similar, when you look at height and maybe weight, they're not going to bring all that other stuff necessarily, but that's okay. They bring other things. This guy will be a better, more skilled kind of scorer than Thero. He's a good enough rebounder. It's not a huge difference in their rebounding numbers. Jir Watkins, if Arkansas went in that direction. The other thing with him, and I was looking at it, you always look at statistics, you go, well, can this be someone that maybe would be a little better at Arkansas shooting three, or somewhere else that maybe when you look at it statistically, it doesn't seem maybe that, maybe it doesn't tell the full story. When I looked at all 4 years of Jir Watkins in college, 2 at VCU and then the last 2 at Florida State, he's never been better than a 34% three-point shooter. At this point, it's less likely that he's going to be a 35% or better. So, you're not going to be counting on him necessarily being a guy that's one of your snipers there, like a Nate Ament would be. But this guy's got a ton of experience. He knows all the tricks. He's an older guy, stronger guy. So you can make comparisons about what you were looking at for a position. That doesn't mean every one of them brought the same exact qualities. There's differences there. And then you can decide, well, I would prefer that over that, or I prefer that, a little more height and shooting ability from distance than that. So I go through all that just to make those comparisons and contrast, and then say how it might work. Pierre would definitely check boxes in terms of a proven high volume three-point shooter at a high clip. Will it translate, though, from Jacksonville State in Conference USA? Similarly, like Chaz Lanier did when he left North Florida and basically didn't have much drop off at all percentage-wise. His volume actually went up, and he was one of the best players in the country. Could you be lightning striking again, similar to that, bringing a guy, if you get Pierre, as that kind of shooter scorer coming from the mid-major level to Arkansas? You never know. But I think it's a good idea to go after a shooter. That's why I spent so much time on it yesterday, and why, honestly, when I went back, I saw there were a lot of comments that people thought maybe I was a little bit too hard on DJ Wagner in terms of some of the negative stuff I was saying. And I went back and found where I talked mostly about him, and I can't argue that it didn't come across that way. And I'm sorry for that, because I really wanted to give the balance of, here are the positives, the retention. He's a great, strong physically, that helps defensively. And I didn't say enough, he's really good at getting downhill and getting to the basket. I was comparing him to Boogie, a better facilitator, better with taking care of the ball. DJ was far superior in getting all the way to the basket and be able to finish through contact or finishing period. Once you got into that serious competition. And there's the 3-year continuity is what he'd have with with Cal if he comes back. That's huge because we keep talking about how important retention is. I did say that I don't wish him away, and I meant that. I don't hate him. I don't believe in hate or love in terms of, well, if you criticize, you're just a hater. Or if you don't criticize, you just are a sunshine pumper, whatever. I don't believe in that stuff. I think sometimes two things can be true at once, multiple things can be true at once, and you want to talk about all of it. And maybe I didn't do as good a job last night as I should have, balancing that a little bit. So for anyone that pointed that out, I can't argue with you. I went back and watched some of that. It seemed like it was slanted a little bit, and that was not my intent, and it's not how I feel about it. I was just trying to give both sides, and I didn't do a good enough job on giving the positive side. But the other parts of the positives are, it's not just about the continuity of retention, the familiarity with Calipari, but there's been a lot of trust with that family, with the Wagner family and Calipari. And you got to think that that goes back to Wagner's youth, before he was even old enough to be fully recruited. And once you get to know people, there's a connection there that sometimes you get on a page with somebody, and that's even a different continuity, with a player than you would get with anybody else that maybe even played for you for 4 years, because you've had that relationship even beyond that. So there's all kinds of ways we can look at that and say, don't mess with that. Find a way to get DJ back. I should have talked more about that stuff because I've thought about it, but I talked about so much stuff last night. I lose track of things. I start talking, I start reading comments, and then I forget where I left off. Yeah, I'm making excuses, but I should have done a better job. All right, we're almost 46 minutes in. I've done it again. I hope the Pierre news, we actually had some intel tonight that's not out there. I tweeted it, then came on here immediately and started talking about it. We'll see about Malik Ewin. We'll see where it goes. We'll see if the paperwork that's done so far ends up being what the result is. You sure hope so. It seems that way with Nick Pringle, but who knows what could shift that. But at the end of the day, Calipari's going to get two really good frontline players, I believe. I really don't have any doubt about that. I don't have any doubt that he'll either replace, supplement of another forward that can either be a 3-4 or a true 4 to help Brazil there, assuming you keep Brazil, and I think they will, and or another guard, and another guard if DJ leaves. And then what I'm not sure about, I'm sure that the frontline quality will be there. What I'm not sure about is if you do get another backcourt piece or another, let's say it's a 3-4 combo, that it'll be somebody that can elevate Arkansas's three-point shooting expectations relative to where they were last year. I'm not sure about that. I need to see one of these names land that their stats clearly tell you, okay. And I know you can then point to a guy like Nelly Davis and say, well, he was a 41% three-point shooter on good volume, and that wasn't necessarily reliable. Remember, he was injured. It took him a while to get through that, and his numbers were really bad early and got better as he went on. So his last percentage wasn't near what he did last year. And he ended up being streaky. And part of that was uncomfortable positionally when they were having DJ at the 2, him at the 3, and Boogie at the 1. There's a combination of things that might have impacted that. But anyone that would bring that up, that's a fair point to make as well. Pierre I would say he's a more ball. Someone's asking, can Pierre play a catch and shoot kind of he's more of a ball, a creator off the bounce than maybe Wilkerson has to be, or maybe than Wilkerson is. Wilkerson can create off the bounce, but he's, when you watch him, there's a lot of catch and shoot in there, a lot of deep. Pierre probably is a little bit more using his dribble, whether it's shooting threes or not. But the three-point shooting volume's there, and he's got all kinds of craft. Catch and shoot's part of it, as is creating off the bounce. Both of them can do that. The best shot creators off the bounce, in my opinion, are the ones that do it with less is more. In other words, one dribble, sidestep, or step back, maybe 2 dribbles. The guys that are wandering out there and then they pull up, sometimes you have to kind of be streaky. Sometimes you look at that and a guy hits 3 or 4 that and you go, wow, that's amazing. But it's hard to consistently be good doing it that way. Less is more when you're talking efficiency, usually that far away from the basket. So yeah, Pierre's got catch and shoot in there, but he's probably a little bit more on ball kind of guy in terms of everything he does offensively than even Lamar Wilkerson, if that helps answer that question. But statistically, they're so very similar across the board. Lamar a little more efficient everywhere for sure. But remember, Pierre was the Conference USA Player of the Year. Both of those guys were first team. So, I go out to YouTube and check out highlights of players. It's highlights. It's always better when you can watch, as much game raw footage as you can, or stretches of games, or an entire game. You can find that too, because highlights just really show you the good stuff for the most part. There's very few exceptions to that. Let's just go through some other names. I was going to get off here. It's 50 minutes, but I had a plan to go through some more of these names. So we went Eddie Lampkin. We talked about Keyshawn Murphy last night on the front line. Ian Jackson, we've talked about him. Would fit the bill. North Carolina transfer, 39.5%. Made 6 from 3, made 60 of those bad boys from distance this year. 12 points per game for Carolina. In the portal, Calipari recruited him. Arkansas recruited him under the previous staff. Calipari at Kentucky ended up at North Carolina in the middle of his junior years when he committed. So he had a good rookie season this year as a Tar Heel, but he's taking a visit. Everyone's talking St. John's. He's a New York guy, Bronx, going to visit St. John's on Sunday and Monday. What's he going to do Friday and Saturday? The dead period ends tonight. Would he come to Arkansas maybe? Who knows? But you got to wonder, would that be another option there? Pierre's one. Ian Jackson maybe. And I had Jerron's name down here in this list for tonight. I had all this ready before that phone call I got. But so I was going to talk about him anyway, but we had to lead with him because of what was breaking there. Cedric Coward, a 6'6" guard out of Washington State. Someone asked me about him the other day. Went into the portal a few days ago. But he's a big guard, but he only played 6 games last year due to injury, but 17.7 points, 7 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 1.7 blocks, only in 33 minutes per game, but only 6 or 7 games, 55.7% from the field, 12 of 30 from 3. So that was 40% on the button, and 83+%, almost 84% from the free throw line, but only 6 games. Now, he was a transfer. He played at Washington State, only I mentioned barely more than a handful of games. Played 2 years in mid-major Eastern Washington before that. And if you look at the last of those 2 years at Eastern Washington, his numbers across the board, percentage-wise, averages, production, were very similar to what he was doing at Washington State. And again, just barely more than a handful of games. So you went from one tier of mid-major. Washington State's been a Pac-12 team forever, Pac-10, then Pac-12. That dissolved. They weren't invited to one of the major conferences. And they're now in the West Coast Conference, or one of the West Coast Conference, along with Oregon State. And if you looked at them from a basketball standpoint, both of those schools typically over the years weren't all that strong in a high major conference anyway. So I don't know about all the competition in that league and some of these numbers in a very small sample size, but maybe he's a guy because of his efficiency, shooting, and some size. We know Calipari likes big guards. Maybe that's Cedric Coward's a guy you would look at. Dylan Mitchell, we didn't talk about him. He went in the portal a couple of days ago. Former McDonald's All-American. I think he was maybe one of the MVPs of one of those All-Star games, and not the McDonald's All-American game, back in 2022. Remember Nick Smith Jr., Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh? Remember that trio? What were we all singing when Musselman, EPM landed those 3 5 stars? But Dylan Mitchell was a guy for a while that Nick Smith Jr. was trying to help recruit to Arkansas. And so had you landed another 5-star, another McDonald's All-American, you had 4 at that time, what would you have said? What would you have said? Hallelujah. Sweet Uncle Baby Billy, right? But he's a guy that hasn't really panned out in terms of a projected one and done, or a guy going on to the next level, maybe even after 2 years. He spent 2 years at Texas. He spent this past season at Cincinnati. He's in the portal, 6'8", 210, 9.9 points per game, 6.9 rebounds. So let's just round it up, 10.7 rebounds. And he shoots over 61% from the field. Everything's around the rim for him, basically. Um, he he shot 39.5% from the free throw line this year. For his career, he's at less than 50%, but it was even worse this year. He was 39.5% at the foul line. He's never been a three-point shooter, although this season at Cincinnati, he took about a three per game and shot about 30%, between 29 and 30%. Basically, DJ Wagner numbers in terms of percentage. But at the forward spot, and if he's a little bit of a threat to maybe take it, that's not awful. That's not awful. And it's just a comparison there. Great work at Kevin McPherson. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just proud to be a Razorback. Go Big Red. Yeah, I got preachy tonight, didn't I? I'm not trying to be defensive. It's just really hard to lay out how this stuff could land. And you think the reporting's telling you, well, I'm telling everybody these guys are, it's done. It's a done deal. And I've done everything I can, turn myself into pretzels to give you examples of why you can't look at it that way yet. Just be glad maybe that it's progressing and maybe, I mean, looking good, but how good does it look when a top 5 comes out for a guy that you heard the paperwork's done on? I get it. I understand. That doesn't add up quite. Well, I try to help make it look good for you because it's based on the reality. I'm not BSing that. No BS. Yeah, Watkins is in the draft in the portal. So is Pierre. I mentioned he's got a workout. I put it on the tweet, and I've already forgotten what day he's doing the workout. Is it Sunday? It's in my tweet. I got to go back and look at it. I was rushing to get that out, making sure I had it right, and then I was trying to jump on here, and I wiped some of that away, the NBA part of it. So there's that. Let's round up. We're going to get to an hour tonight. Let's just do it. I've gone through most of the players I wanted to talk about. There's probably more we could have. Tyron Stokes, class of 2026. I was asked about him last night, and I started to talk about him, and I got sidetracked with other things, and we didn't come back to it. I've been having conversations for days with other recruiting analysts on the national level about what did it mean that he's not going to play spring and summer. They were wanting to break. Well, that's probably because he's going to forego, reclass to 2025. Then that was, the brakes were pumped a little bit on that. But look, I covered this guy, speaking of spring and summer, this past spring and summer, teammates with AJ DeBonsa on the Oakland Soldiers on the Nike circuit. And this is one of those jack of all trades, 6'5", 6'6". Some list him at 6'7", somewhere in there. There's a little Darion Williams with him. There are other comparisons, sort of a point forward kind of guy. But he was a triple-double machine. They played together not only for the Oakland Soldiers when they were both also 1 year, I think at least 1 year in high school at Prolific Prep. Well, we know DeBonsa went off to that Utah school, that private school in Utah, that basketball school there. And Stokes went over to Notre Dame High School in Los Angeles for this past season. But it remains to be seen exactly what he's going to do. I have a source that tells me that that they're going to have a meeting with him and his mom and some other folks over the weekend to kind of figure out exactly what's next. There's rumors that he's going to reclass and go to BYU and rejoin with DeBonsa and play there. He's going to take a visit, I believe, to Louisville this weekend. Well, he's been a West Coast guy when you look at it from the teams he's played on, but he's originally from Louisville. And so Louisville's been in on him, and I think he's visiting there this weekend. And it doesn't matter if you're 2025 or 2026, you're at a place where you can take visits. We know J.J. Andrews, who's going to make his announcement May 15th, has already visited all of his schools, and he's still, a junior. So, but we'll see if Tyron Stokes reclassifies. The reason why it would be a topic of interest for Arkansas fans is Calipari's made him a priority. He's gone out to see him in person out in California more than once. When he did the overseas trip to go to the Team USA FIBA competition over the summer, Stokes was playing up with some of the 2025 guys like DeBonsa and some of those guys that were on that team. Remember, Acuff wasn't on that team. That was a 17 under team. Acuff played with the 18U in the AmeriCup and was the MVP. That was also FIBA. So sometimes these things get a little confusing, but Stokes, being a class lower, actually played with the 2025 guys. Chris Sinak was one of those. There were some other 2026 guys, but Calipari's been out to see him even in an international play in FIBA while looking at other players as well. But, that's part of recruiting is being seen, right? And so if you're being seen by 10 to 12 5-stars, and let's say you're recruiting seriously half of those, then you can make the case to each one of them as you go. I was there to see you. You were one of the ones, And I came to your high school to see you, and I came to this event to evaluate you. You're building that connection, right? So it matters. Could Arkansas be in play for a Tyron Stokes? When Calipari was talking last night about, I'm going to recruit top level high school guys, don't just assume that covers Nate Ament or the future classes coming up. It could be a guy like this. We always said Calipari's the kind of guy that he's stoked for these reclass kind of guys. And how do we know that? This time last year, Will Riley reclassed from 25 to 26. I've compared him physically to Nate Ament. Went to Illinois. Arkansas was trying to get in on that with Calipari. He ended up at Illinois. Mika Murnin, who you had on campus back in September for a visit. Class of 2026, 5-star, top 10 rated guy at the time. Then they were, maybe he's going to reclass. His agent, who I've reached out to this week, hasn't gotten back with me yet. Maybe I will hear from him soon. We can have an update on that. Is he where is he at on the reclass thing? Mika Murnin, 6'10", 6'11", teammates with J.J. Andrews on that Brad Bill Elite team that won the Nike E16 championship with the, the Peach Jam, which is their championship. All right, I am signing off. I went over an hour. Boy, I did it again. Thanks for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Please hit subscribe, like, and share. Turn on the notifications. Tell a friend about me. Send me a message in a bottle. Pat me on the back, figuratively, whatever. I appreciate you being here. Be shocked if Stokes anywhere but Louisville. Yeah, I mean, but we talk about these things. You guys ask, I get questions, and we do the best we can. We just do the best that we can. Thank you for being here, watching me do the best I can. Till next time, take care. We'll see you then. Drop my glass.